On June 5th, 1967, Israel launched a preemptive series of airstrikes, nearly destroying all of Egypt's air force, thus starting the Six-Day War. Prior to this, Egypt joined with several Arab nations in 1948 to invade Israel, in support of Palestinian Arabs fighting against the newborn country. Tensions grew even more when in 1954, Egypt seized control of the Israeli ship Bam Galim in order to not let it enter the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is supposed to be available to all nations, according to international agreements. In response, Israel conducted a raid which caused the 51 deaths of Egyptian soldiers. Then, in 1956, Israel planned with Britain and France to attack Egypt. Israeli troops then invaded Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and headed directly to the Suez Canal. Britain and France then followed suit by attacking Egypt. After seeing this, President Eisenhower persuaded France, Britain, and Israel into signing a ceasefire and stop invading Egypt. The Israelis and others agreed, and British, French, and Israeli forces were forced to leave. After this, the United States and Israel started to become better allies, which annoyed the Arabs. Even John F. Kennedy said this at a college speech.
"Let us make it clear that we will never turn our backs on our steadfast friends in Israel, whose adherence to the democratic way must be admired by all friends of freedom."
The Arab nations were specifically angry at the USA for helping the Israelis with their economy. The United States even sold arms to the Israelis. Fast forward years later, in 1967, tensions between Israel and Egypt became extremely high. One reason of this is after the closure of the Straits of Tiran, a place in which the MFO is stationed to maintain the freedom of navigation for the Israelis by observing Egypt's actions. Then in May, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt's president, announced that the Straits would not allow Israeli ships in. Egypt then kicked all of the U.S. peacekeepers out and stationed all of their military force across their border. On June 1st, Israel widened its cabinet and created a national unity government, and on June 4th, Israel decided to go to war. And then, on June 5th, 1967, Israel launched a preemptive series of airstrikes, nearly destroying all of Egypt's air force, thus starting the Six-Day War. The name of the strike was called Operation Focus. Operation Focus was launched under Mordechai Hod's command. Hod was a major general on the Israeli Air Force. Nearly all of Egypt's air force was eradicated, basically giving Israel the skies. Israel mostly focused on the Egyptian border. The plan was to surprise Egyptians. The way they achieved this is by camouflaging themselves on the border the night before the war. At 7:50 a.m., Israeli troops crossed the border. Israel then began to message Jordan saying they will not attack them if they don't get involved with the war. Nasser then tells Hassan bin Talal, Jordan's king, that they have inflicted massive damage on Israel. This makes Hassan decide to attack Israel. Israel then, in response to Jordan's attack, attacks the Jordanian airfield, nearly destroying most of their planes. One day later, on June 6, Syrians started to attack the Galilee Israeli communities. Israel then attacks Syria's airfields and destroys their planes. After hours of Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and Israelis fighting, Egypt starts to make a mass retreat. Israelis then captured the Sinai Peninsula. Soon after, the United Nations tried to find a way that all these countries could come to a good compromise. After reading the terms, Israel and Jordan accepted the terms, but Syria and Egypt didn't, which meant that Jordan had to give up the West Bank to Israel. On June 7th at 10 a.m., Israel captures eastern Jerusalem. Jerusalem is considered to be a very holy place to the Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Jerusalem isn't supposed to be claimed by anyone, but Israel runs its primary governmental institutions, and Palestine watches it as its seat of power. Then at 12:15, Israel successfully took over Sharm el-Sheikh. With Sharm el-Sheikh captured, the Israelis opened up the Straits of Tiran up again for all ships. Meanwhile, throughout the whole day, Syria still continues heavy fire on northern Israeli communities. On June 8th, Israel continues to fight with Syria and Egypt. Syria continued heavy fire on Israeli settlements. Israel then starts to consider if they should also attack the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is a region in the Levant. Israel then decides to capture the Golan Heights for the safety of the northern Israeli communities. On June 9th, Israel fights with Syria to try and capture the Golan Heights. Then on June 10th, after constant fighting, Israel gains the Golan Heights. On June 11th, the United Nations created a ceasefire to which all the parties agreed to. In this ceasefire, Israel gained control of the Sinai Peninsula, West Bank, Golan Heights, Gaza Strip, and eastern Jerusalem. The impact of this war was devastating to the Arabs, but to Israel, it was one of their biggest victories. Israel only lost around 900 Israelis and 4,517 were wounded, while the Arab casualties were between 10,000 and 15,000 deaths. And most Arabs' lives were affected during and after the war.
أجا الجيران قالوا لي زارتنا بلش الحرب. قلت لهم إيش؟ قالوا لي بلش الحرب.
كنت أنا هناك رحت فيزت على جيروسالم وبعدين كنت بدي أروح. ضليت يوم السبت كان يوم الاثنين اليهود احتلوا القدس.
قلت لهم اوكي، قالوا لازم تجيبي اكل الك وللاولاد. قلت له اوكي. على كل حال والجيران قالوا بدنا خبز ناكل، فيش حدا، صارت الطيارات تيجي وتضرب.
لما احتلوها كانت تنزل القنابل بالحوش محل ما احنا ساكنين، رصاص ينزل بالحوش والحمامات برا، يعني ما نقدرش نروح على الحمام لانه رصاص يبقى قدامنا.
وتخبينا تحت الشجر، قلنا يعني راح الطيارات يضربوا البيوت.
بعدين كان في هذه منع تجول، ما فيش دكاكين مسكرة، لا في الواحد يقدر يشتري أكل ولا يشتري إشي.
إلي لكل الجيران والأولاد طبعا خافوا اللي يسمعوا صوت الطيارات والرصاص والدنيا.
كانوا الجنود العرب يا حرام يا حرام، كانوا يقتلوهم ويرتموا بالشوارع مرميين.
بعدين يعني مشي الحال، ضلينا على طول الأسبوع الحرب ونحن
قعدت 15 days هناك، 15 يوم قعدت بالحرب.
هيك لما وقف الحرب أجاني خبر إنه جاي هو، اطلعي من البلد وتعالي على الأردن.
ونادوا يوم إنه اللي بحب يطلع يجي على باب العمود. طلعنا على باب العمود، أخذونا بالبساط على ريحة، مشونا في المية قبل ما قطعنا من عند العرب لعند اليهود. مشينا وأخذنا سيارة ورحنا على بيتنا في حمام.
After the conflict, most of Egypt's, Jordan's, and Syrian armies were destroyed, which made Israel the dominant military power. Israel's territories also created geographical conflict, which affected religion and other aspects of Arabs' lives. One group of people that were drastically affected by the Israel's takeover was the Palestinians. The Palestinians were not allowed into Israel's territories, but Israel territories went through most of Palestine's land, so the Palestinians barely had anywhere to live. Still today, these territories remain, and Palestinians are still suffering. Israel is still also one of the most powerful countries in the Middle East. These days, Israel and the Arabs are more peaceful than it used to be. But President Trump's claim that Israel should have Jerusalem as its capital has sparked a new conflict in the Middle East. Luckily, the United Nations defied Donald Trump's wish and condemned the putting of an embassy in Jerusalem. In the end, the conflict and compromise of the Six-Day War shaped the way the Middle East would act for the years to come. From its land captured, Arabs' disappointing defeat, and a big victory for Israel.